Hello, welcome back to Homeschool Journey 101. The other question we're going to talk about today is this really confusing thing in New York called the letter. And if you're a New York homeschooler, you know what I mean, that nobody's even exactly sure what to call the letter. It's just this mysterious thing. And basically, one reason that people don't know exactly what to call it is even the end letter can vary quite a bit. So let's just start at the beginning. This is not a problem in any other state that I know of, but in New York, when you finish your homeschooling, there is an option, if you will, to get a letter that says possibly two different things. But what you hope that the letter says is that your child has completed basically the equivalent of a high school diploma. So the school district actually is saying this homeschooler has graduated from high school, if you will. Now, this is very upsetting to a lot of other homeschoolers. And believe me, when I moved here from Michigan, I was just thinking like, what? Because of course you think you're homeschooling and you don't want to have to be beholden to the school district, if you will. But here's the thing, it's not that difficult. New York State has set up pretty specific guidelines of what you have to do to be legally homeschooling. They're among the toughest in the country, but they're definitely not impossible. Really, it's just breaking it down into pieces. So in New York, in order to get the letter, you have to be up on sending in your quarterlies. In other words, 4 times a year, you have to send in a brief report on how your homeschooling is going. Like, has your child actually been completing what they said they were going to complete, okay? Then, at the beginning of the year, you also send them in sort of a plan that says, this is what I think I'm going to do at the beginning of the year, all right? You also have to, at that last letter you send in, sort of sum it up. Like, okay, we did actually finish what we said we were going to, or possibly it says something more like, we're still working on it. You know, we'll be done in 2 months. But at any rate, you have to each year let the school district know that you are taking the steps that have been laid out by the state of New York. I know it sounds like a lot, but it's really not very hard. If it took you an hour 4 times during the year, I'd be surprised, okay? It's not as hard as it sounds. But when your child is in high school, you also have to agree to have had them tested every year. Testing varies widely. Often you can do it in your home, but you have to do the tests that your school district agrees to, which do vary. So rather than tell you what they are, I would say check with your school district. Some like Iowa, some like the CAT from California. There's really a wide variety, but you do not have to take the regions, the New York regions. You're just going to take some kind of standardized testing. And nobody really cares how you do as long as your child meets these real minimums. So it's not like something you have to study for hugely. The big thing is still going to be the SAT to get into college. At least now, who knows, I guess that could change. So in order to get this letter, lots of pieces have to have been happening. You need to have been reporting all the way through. In high school, you have to take that test every year that shows that your child is progressing the standardized test. Before that, you have to do it every other year, but people seem to have been able to skimp on that. We do know people who could not get the letter because they forgot to test 1 year, even if it's like your sophomore year. So let's say we fast forward and you know your child is graduating, okay? Then what you do is you actually send in a letter requesting from your school district a letter back, this letter of equivalency, this letter that says you graduated. Before that, if you wanted to get the letter, it would be really smart to be in contact with them, each step of the way to make sure you were getting this letter. So then most people actually apply for the letter sometime early in the senior year, because it doesn't always happen on the same timeline people want it to happen. Sometimes it can take a few months to get the letter. Now comes the question. Now that you understand like all the steps involved in the letter, there's a fair number of homeschoolers that just don't want to mess with the letter. And they want to know, do I really have to get this letter? What's going to happen if I don't get this letter? Are there any homeschoolers that don't get the letter? And the official answer is like this: you should get the letter. There's so many times that people don't get the letter and they come back to me and they are sorry they didn't. So here's the thing though, you really can get around it. If your child is going to college out of state and you know your child is going out of state, very few colleges are going to ask for that letter out of state, and virtually none outside of the Northeast. So a lot of people will know ahead, my child's going to Gordon College, my child's going to Wheaton, whatever, so I'm not going to bother with the letter. And it's true. There's very few colleges that would probably, outside of New York, really be upset if you didn't get the letter. But there are some in Massachusetts that will require the letter from you. But here's the thing. If there's any chance that your child will later decide to come back home and live at home and go to college locally, it becomes a lot harder if you don't have the letter. So if you know for sure that your child is going out of state and you know for sure that you don't think you're ever going to need it, then some people quit doing it. The other thing is you can go to a community college, and so let's say my child graduates from homeschooling. I don't bother getting the letter, but I send my child to community college, and at the same time they're doing their associate's degree, you can do a degree where you get the equivalent of a GED letter through the college. I just think that's a waste. You did all of this other stuff. Why pay for a few other classes? But there's people who do that, and that works for them. But if you're trying to go to SUNY Albany or most state schools, even Christian schools in the state of New York, like Houghton or Elam or whatever, you're going to need that letter. It's really hard to get around that letter. You can, but it's much harder. So how can you get around that letter? Well, my first 4 kids did not get the letter and went on to do fine, but do well. They did very well. What am I saying? But I mean to say, they were able to get around the letter, but they all went out of state except one, and he had so many college credits already that they decided to just say he was a college student. He had a lot of college credits by the time he went to college. It's highly variable. It does seem to happen that students that have really high SAT scores and a lot of college sometimes can get by without the letter, but it's a really big risk to not get the letter in the state of New York. It's not that you can't work around it, but you possibly putting up roadblocks for your child, and it's just not that hard to get the letter. So on the other hand, Renee, what do you think? What do you think about the letter?
Well, Helen, I'm going to have to agree with you again on this one. You may not want to go through what in your mind seems like a big hassle to get this letter, but you're going to want this letter. It's like your insurance policy against roadblocks and hurdles later on. And even if you think that you have your plan all mapped out to get around that letter, if your child or your circumstances change at the last minute and they're coming back to New York State to go to college, you're going to want that letter. And it's hard to get it if you don't make the plans ahead of time, meaning notifying your school district early that you want it. I can speak from experience because even knowing all of this and even having discussed this with Helen so many times and counseling so many homeschoolers to ask for that letter early in the school year, I did not do that. And my children were, by New York standards, well over documented with all of their testing and their quarterly reports. I am a very big fan of over documenting just to prove that we've done all of these things and they've met all these requirements. And I waited to the last minute to ask for my letter. And the school, my son went to UAlbany, and they did not really specify anything about the letter. And then when we asked them at that time, they said that we didn't need the letter. But that was talking to one person. And when it really came down to it, in the middle of the summer, they said, you need this letter or you're not starting classes. So we then had to come up with a plan to get around the letter and do another equivalency test that they required. And you don't want to be in that position. You don't want to panic if your child's plans have changed or the college that they've chosen to go to has not, the person you've spoken to hasn't given you the correct information. In September or October, send a message, send a letter to your superintendent's office and say that you're going to be asking for that letter. Could they start to review your records and get it prepared? It's easy enough to do it early on, and you'll have it. And you won't have to worry about scrambling or getting around the letter, even if it is possible. So we can't emphasize that enough. Just a little bit of planning. It's not that hard to get it. It just takes a little footwork ahead of time to let the school district know that you're going to want that letter.
Exactly. And, so fast forward, I have got a letter for all of my younger children. And each time it's actually gone very smoothly. You hear a lot of things about people who hit a lot of roadblocks. But my experience through the years is that actually the thing is you just have to do all of the steps that they said. Invariably, when I run into somebody who couldn't get the letter, it's because they actually are trying to get the letter even though they didn't do some piece of it. So let's say that you're right now, your child is a sophomore in high school and you realize you forgot to take the test. It's often okay up through the summer. So you can contact your school district and say, hey, I'm going to do the testing now. Another way that you can kind of get around the testing problem is a lot of school districts will let you homeschool 12 months a year. And so if you're doing that, then it gives you a lot of play if you can follow me with when you're going to take that testing. But let's say that it is your senior year, and this did actually happen to my daughter, and one of my daughters, and you apply for the letter at the beginning of the year, and we actually got a message back like, you're missing X. And so the really great thing about that is there was still time to get that class done and get the letter in the summer before she went off to college. So by applying early, even if your school district moves along pretty snappily, you can figure out if at the last minute there's something new that's happened that you don't realize. Really stick to your polite self when you're dealing with your school district. Be your gracious person that you are, the most gracious version of yourself. But still try to make sure every year that you get back a letter, say, when you've written back and said like, okay, you reviewed my information and it all looks good. But they might just be, there's two pieces of this. You could get a letter back that says it all looks good, as in it all looks legal. That's different than them saying, it all looks good for you to get the letter of equivalency. Because this happens sometimes too, that people are confused between if the school district is saying you're legally homeschooling versus we're gonna write you a letter. And so there's little pieces that your school district may require, like you need to have, does your child learn about fire safety? There's a variety of things that you just may not have in your particular wheelhouse of what they're expecting. So you'll get from your school district that list, but sometimes you get lost or you get confused. So keep a hard copy of this correspondence and keep yourself organized with their checklist so that you can make sure that you cross off all those boxes. I just want to repeat this in case you live in Oregon or Arkansas and you're thinking like, because this is only about the state of New York. And again, I've done it with all my younger children. I really didn't have any problem. I didn't do it with my older children because I think I had just come from Michigan, and I just couldn't believe that I was being expected to do this or something. I don't know. But it really was not a problem. And it won't be for you if you just make sure that you keep on track, look at it every year, check off all the boxes, and you're going to get the letter. Why not do it? Just have that in case, just in case plans change, just in case a pandemic comes and you decide that you're going to go to state college, whatever the scenario is, that if in fact you're going to have your child end up in New York State, you have a lot of options still. So don't worry, it's easy. You just have to do all the right things. And thanks for listening. If you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up or consider subscribing. Hope to see you again. Have a great day.